Hello, I'm Luca and this is the Web3 in Travel podcast, where you can learn about crypto, blockchain, and how the new internet will change travel. Today, I will talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is apparently unrelated to Web3 in travel, and for many reasons, it is actually unrelated. We can't really use Bitcoin too much in travel, but we can learn a lot from studying Bitcoin. It helps us understanding the fundamentals. In the last episode, I was insisting on fundamentals, and Bitcoin is like a continuation of this discussion. Bitcoin is not something we can really use in Web3 in travel. It doesn't have smart contracts. It's very slow. We can't do most of the things we are excited about for building an alternative infrastructure for the internet in travel. But it has all these properties, which also all the other more flexible infrastructure and protocols and cryptocurrencies and blockchains, which we may use in Web3 in travel, have or should have. Let me take it from a bit far away. In the last cycle, I've seen many people getting in and skipping completely Bitcoin. Not only not buying Bitcoin and buying, some altcoins or maybe Ethereum, but completely skipping the learning curve of understanding what Bitcoin is. And by doing that, some of them, and I'm sure many of the people in general, have completely skipped the first year of, the first lesson, the most important lesson of all, on which you build all the rest of your knowledge. And Bitcoin is only based on that. So everything you learn about Bitcoin is useful for anything you do later in Web3 in travel. Now, I understand it's easy to dismiss Bitcoin as something which is not relevant anymore. It was this thing which started it all, but it's not important anymore. And I don't agree with this take. I think Bitcoin is really important still today. At least it's really important to understand it. And the risk is that if you do not take the time to understand Bitcoin, you may later make some assumptions in projects you follow or projects you launch, in which everything looks great and Web3, but it has none of the decentralized characteristics which make this space relevant. Now, of course, you could understand decentralization in different ways. You could study Ethereum, you could study any travel project and try to remove all the aspects which are not about decentralization and study it. But Bitcoin is great for that because Bitcoin is only about decentralization in a way. It is a project which without there's no full decentralization anywhere in this world, but without a very, very high degree of decentralization can thrive. There's less stuff around Bitcoin. It is pretty simple compared to other things. Like, let's say that you are analyzing a Web3 travel project, which says we are decentralized. And yes, they have the decentralized aspect. And then they have all the other aspects, the business model, the front end, the money they raise, the marketing, etc., etc. So Bitcoin is only about the decentralization. And then the other big part of Bitcoin is the monetary value, etc. But this it's very easy to don't look at it if you're just studying decentralization. So yeah, again, if you don't understand Bitcoin, there's a good chance that in the next bull run, or in general in the next years in Web3 travel, you may kind of not understand what are the relevant parts, or you may fall for schemes or simply you may, maybe work on the wrong project in the wrong way, etc. So basic fundamental information and knowledge about Web3 travel can be acquired by studying Bitcoin. So let me today go back to what Bitcoin is, where it stands in general in its journey. So let's talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the first scarce asset which is existing completely in the digital realm, right? Humans have always been looking for scarce assets for many reasons. One of them is them to be used as money, store of value, and other properties. But we didn't have this on the internet until Bitcoin was invented, right? Everything on the internet can be replicated ad infinitum, just copy paste. Files are not scarce. Once you have access to a file, you can replicate it. And Bitcoin made it possible not to replicate something digital. And this was a necessary precondition to have money, which is completely digital. But then later we discovered that we can do other things, and that's why we have now Ethereum and many other blockchains. But the point is, how do we make something unique online when the very characteristic of computers is that any file can be replicated? And then we have the blockchain for that, and I'm not going to explain the blockchain for the 1,000th time. But we do have now stuff online which cannot be replicated, right? So we can have NFTs, and we can have tokens which represent things in the travel industry. Bitcoin isn't really made for that. That's why we don't have Web3 travel projects running on Bitcoin. But one thing we can learn from Bitcoin or the Bitcoin environment is this focus on the decentralization. So if you go in Bitcoin and you propose to do a fork where, I don't know, there are 10 nodes, for instance, instead of thousands, or there are the nodes are much more powerful, so you can have a Bitcoin running not every 10 minutes, but every 10 seconds, you're going to have a big backlash because that attacks decentralization. And again, because Bitcoin is very simple, it's easy to kind of understand where the risk lies in centralizing, right? Because if you remove decentralization from Bitcoin, you are killing Bitcoin basically, right? And if you kill Bitcoin, there's strong incentives from people who actually own it to keep it alive, right? Web3 projects not running on Bitcoin, in travel or not, do not have this direct connection with decentralization. Decentralization often comes in the way of making things efficient. So there is this, and I talked about this in the last episode, I think, there's always this incredibly strong incentive into centralizing a little bit more. And it's really hard to understand when it is too much, right? You pull, your app is faster, your app is easier. You take away the centralization, your app becomes almost a Web2 app. And then at a certain point, you wonder, why did I even use Web3? And if the marketing is there, there's a token, you may want to keep this illusion. Now, that happens when you don't understand Bitcoin, in my opinion, or when you don't understand decentralization deeply. And that might be fine if you're a founder. If you're a founder, you want your company to run, you want your startup to grow. Yeah, okay, even if it's not decentralized, it's fine as long as it provides value. But if you are a user or an investor, you need to actually be able to assess how decentralized this project is. If you're a user, maybe because the project like promise you some level of safety, because that thing is not decided by a human. If you're an investor, maybe you're counting on the token or on the shares, and you need to actually understand basically what you're buying. So looking at Bitcoin and Bitcoin's history, you also see that it's a slow progression towards relevance. It's not immediately apparent. It takes a long time. It looks inefficient, but year after year after year, it slowly becomes clearer that it's something new that we actually need. All right. So I'm talking today where we are on the verge of a Bitcoin ETF. Bitcoin ETF basically means people will be able to buy Bitcoin without having to custody Bitcoin. And it also means big institutions will be basically allowed finally to buy Bitcoin. It is a good thing or a bad thing for Bitcoin. There's good aspects, there's bad aspects, and I'm not going to talk about this here today, but if you look at the progression of Bitcoin, which was born in 2009, it's almost, 14 years now, it's been very slow, right? And now you have, after 14 years, BlackRock, like one of the biggest financial companies, if not the biggest financial company in the world, which wants to offer Bitcoin to their customers. What does it mean? Well, it wasn't exactly the startup quick growth, right? It has been growing slowly for many years. You've seen it growing, you've seen it crashing, but the general trend is clearly of very strong growth under any measure. I mean, not only price, but the number of users, number of wallets, and so on. And I suspect that in travel, we will see some projects like this, meaning projects which start, maybe not at the start as a startup which raises money, maybe some people building something really hard to build, and they build it and it doesn't work and it's slow and it's hard to use, but it doesn't die. And then a few people understand the value behind it, they start using it, and again it's clunky and it's slow, but it doesn't die. And then people start investing into this, maybe there's a token, and then it improves very slowly, and then it crashes with the next crash, and then everybody thinks it's dead, and then it's still there, it doesn't die, because it's got a very strong core value proposition, and nobody else is offering it, and there's no way to create this quickly. It takes time. And it doesn't die. And then years pass, and then maybe this thing becomes the travel app everybody uses. Or maybe it becomes, as Bitcoin, something very few people actually use, but which is the bedrock of the whole crypto space in a way. So I don't know. I cannot make predictions. I'm just trying to see if there's going to be a parallel between Bitcoin and some travel-related projects. We haven't seen any of this so far. Doesn't mean we will not see them. But if you have studied Bitcoin and you understand how it became, how it reached this level of relevance, I'm not going to say it's relevant. I think for most people in the world, Bitcoin is not relevant yet. But if you see the way it went from zero, some piece of code where you could mine 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes to something where one Bitcoin is worth tens of thousands of dollars, and the BlackRock has an ETF for that. If you understand that, you may recognize the signs. You as a user, you as a builder, you as an investor. Okay? Maybe we will not have it. Again, I cannot forecast. We're just trying to guess. But very, very decentralized systems are resilient. Okay? That's a property which emerges from decentralization. They are not only slow in usage, but often they are slow in growth. And the Web3 travel space is still very much startup focused. And by this, I mean the main path to building something useful seems to be, okay, somebody has an idea, they go to a venture capitalist, they get some money, and they start building. And I'm 100% sure we will have incredible companies coming out of this model, as we had incredible companies coming out of this model in Web 2. But it may be not the only way we see the emergence of mega projects in the travel space. Now, if you started in 2009 with some money in your pocket and you had the choice between being an investor in tech, you could have invested in startups and maybe being an early investor in, I don't know, Airbnb or something else. Or you could have bought Bitcoin. And maybe you could have bought 50 Bitcoin for $1, which are today worth about $17 million. We will see something like that in travel. So today we may want to invest as VCs. We may want to invest as investors in tokens. So buying the tokens, even in small quantities when they launch. Or we may start, and I'm looking at this very keenly, the emergence of extremely decentralized systems, projects, apps, I don't know, specific for travel. And those maybe will require you to, I don't know, launch a node or participate in a kind of ICO, maybe buy an NFT, I don't know. And they may go in to become in 10 years, maybe 5 years, maybe 15 years, something which is in travel like incredibly big. Maybe as big as Bitcoin, like 60% of travel traffic in terms of money goes through this new protocol or new system or new app or new NFT. I don't know. Again, I'm just trying to draw a parallel because we have never really talked about that. So maybe my suggestion here is not only, maybe my suggestion is the following. Study Bitcoin. Study the history of Bitcoin. Listen to maybe early Bitcoin podcasts, maybe not only the new ones, and try to see if there's some parallel with the travel industry. Maybe you will see something happening in the travel industry which catches your eye and displays a set of characteristics of something which looks a bit like Bitcoin. So let me repeat what potentially could be, right? Something which starts from the ground, from a few, maybe even outsiders, something difficult to understand. Bitcoin was really hard to understand at the beginning. When I bought my first one, I bought it because I couldn't understand it, right? Something which really seems to make no sense at all, but at the same time has a value proposition or a mission which is like out of the words. Like, no way you can do that, right? Bitcoin comes out in 2009 and says, we are going to make digital money. And you go like, how? So I don't understand it. And you also think that's impossible. I mean, money is not something you build on a computer. It's, when you go back to the history of money and fiat money, cannot be done. That's your first reaction. And another characteristic is, or reaction you have is like, all right, yeah, I know why you want to do it because, I understand why money is not as it should be. So I understand your where you come from. I understand why you want to do it. But you can't do it. I don't understand it. It's impossible. Forget it. I will not buy Bitcoin when it's worth 10 cents. So how could this play out? We are, really into speculation right now, but it's fun. Let's do it. It could be, it's a very good thought experiment. How would this look like in the travel industry? Well, let's start from the big unsolvable problems, okay, which travel is plagued with. For instance, the fragmentation of data, right? So that data is not out there for anybody to use. It's closed into silos and whatever. It's really fragmented. Like, that's why still today we don't have one app which let us book from, the whole trip from home to the place and back just with one go. We have to go through many different apps because every app is defending their data. So this is one of the unsolvable problems in the travel industry. Let's say somebody comes out and says, we're going to fix this, right? And we're going to fix it by doing this thing which makes no sense to you and is very complicated and we are nerds and you dismiss us, but we're going to fix it. And they start working on it, and then a year later they launch something, again, unusable, clunky, etc., but it kind of could make sense. And that will be a sign. Again, with no guarantee that it works. Bitcoin wasn't the first attempt at digital money, right? It was like the last. And so it doesn't mean, of course, that if you see somebody trying that it is going to work, right? But still, it's a good sign. Big mission, trying to fix the mission in a different way, completely different way. Because most people who try to fix fragmentation in the travel industry, I suppose they try to kind of convince everybody that the solution is to kind of coordinate, but then this coordination wasn't possible because of vested interests. So another thing which I'm looking at is solving the problem on a completely different level from the existing infrastructure. What do I mean by that? Well, let's go back to Bitcoin. The people who created Bitcoin didn't go to banks trying to convince them to integrate their new system in their existing system. They knew it was completely incompatible. Not technically, but it was incompatible because it was an alternative which would make their system obsolete. They didn't go to regulators trying to say, okay, we're trying to create money. Can we do that? Because they know you can't do that. They would say no, right? They simply started building something in a completely different realm. And in that case, it was the internet. And they did it in a way that they didn't really need any kind of integration. Or maybe in a more precise manner, it could work without integrations, and then integrations would happen at the frontier. What do I mean by that? Bitcoin works. If every bank in the world shuts down tomorrow, Bitcoin still works. If fiat money disappears, Bitcoin still works. And if gold disappears, Bitcoin still works. Now, can Bitcoin work if people are not able to exchange their euros or dollars for Bitcoin? Yeah, I could if people start getting paid in Bitcoin. But, we have actually fiat on and off ramps. So people build at the frontier, at the edges, not at the frontier. They build ways to, take your euros and buy Bitcoin, or take your Bitcoin and buy euros. So how could this play out in the travel industry? Well, probably in the specific case of fragmentation of data, maybe somebody will build something which is completely detached from the travel industry as it is. And they will bet on people who are in the travel industry using also their system. Okay, this is really hard because if you're working in the travel industry, you don't want to add complexity. It's complex enough. You want to have everything you use integrated, right? So that every little program and every database talks to each other, and you don't have to worry about that. So very tough sell. But in the same way as people bought Bitcoin, which was not usable, you couldn't buy stuff with it, very hard to get your money. And at the beginning, to exchange fiat money for Bitcoin was really hard. I heard people sending money to Japan to get money to get Bitcoin from the exchange, etc. If there's a strong enough incentive that some people will do the extra effort. I have no idea what this could be for the fragmentation, because in this specific example, this would actually add fragmentation. So maybe they will solve another problem. I don't know. If I knew, I probably would start building it, because it sounds like a very, very beautiful problem to work on. But I don't have this idea. Okay. I hope that, by sharing this thought, maybe somebody else has an idea like this and, comes back to me and say, look, we're going to build this thing and well, maybe I can join. Who knows? So what matters here is the signs, right? So we said the sign of people building something very hard with a very big mission in a very slow way. The other sign is something completely not integrated, completely parallel to the existing system. And we could call this the you can't save the old system. You cannot save the legacy system. It's too old and interconnected with a lot of very, very old systems, like the banking system is running on, you probably have heard about this one. There's banks where they're running on very old programs and programming languages. There's nobody else left who can actually touch them because nobody knows this. These languages like I think Fortran or COBOL, etc. So you get to a point in which you say, look, these cannot be saved. Yeah, it can go on for a long time, right? If you don't touch those parts, they hopefully don't break. But no, it's time to build something completely different. And we haven't seen this in the travel industry yet, right? Everybody is, rightly so, trying to build something which can be plugged in the existing ecosystem. How could you do differently? You can't. I mean, okay, I've been saying for the whole episode that you actually can. I don't know if you can. People who built Bitcoin, I'm not sure they were sure. Sorry for this, but were they sure that this could work? I don't know. They were saying, okay, there's a big problem. It's really something we want to work on, and let's try it again. It's been tried before. Let's try it again. And in that time, for many reasons, it worked. So maybe the scenario in which this doesn't happen is a scenario where the travel industry 50 years from now is still running at its core on legacy systems. And honestly, this seems not very probable. But yeah, it could transform itself slowly in an iterative fashion, like a human body works. Our cells are not the same as they were 7 years ago or something like that. And we didn't really start a new thing, right? So the travel industry is an aging body in terms of software. It's getting older. It's upgrading constantly. It's getting contact lenses. It's getting a bypass on the art. It's getting a hip replacement. But it's getting older at its core. And then we have these exactly two scenarios. One is going to keep getting older forever because it's not actually a human body, so it doesn't die. Or it starts completely anew. And probably the most probable scenario is that we're going to see both things. We're going to see a legacy travel industry running on this aging / upgrading body. And on the other end, we'll also see some offsprings, basically babies, completely new. Actually, not babies. Babies are too similar to the parents. Something completely different. Maybe something like AI versus the internet without AI. A completely new paradigm. So I think this is going to happen. Maybe in a very long time frame, maybe not. But I want to see the first signs. So far, I'm talking by myself here in front of a microphone and a laptop. I came up with two of them. Again, something very big and very slow and very hard to understand. That's one thing. And something completely unrelated, not integrated, not needing integration with the existing system. What else? Well, decentralization, as I was saying, something extremely decentralized, as decentralized as possible. So that's your third signal. So let's do it again. Very decentralized. There's one thing. The second thing is very big mission, hard to understand, very slow growth and development. And third, completely unrelated. Okay, anything else which we can learn from Bitcoin? But you see where I'm going here, right? We look at Bitcoin, we look how Bitcoin came into an existing financial system, money system, and found a space for itself. I'm not saying it changed things to any considerable degree yet, but it found a space. It didn't die. It's there. It's growing. It's being adopted by the legacy system and the travel industry. So I guess what I'm doing in this episode is planting the seed of thought in your mind about this. I am a big believer in behind the scene thinking. Basically, you need to plant a seed and give it time. By talking to myself, I am planting this seed. This is something which came out basically during this episode. I didn't have, when I started talking about Bitcoin here, I wasn't thinking about how the travel industry could see something similar, right? And if you go back to the first minutes or two, actually, I was just planning to use Bitcoin as a learning experience, a learning ground for the travel industry. And now I came up with this concept that we may see something like Bitcoin, but let me be clear, not about money, not like Bitcoin in terms of money, but something with the characteristic of Bitcoin, which solves these unsolvable problems in the travel industry. Will I come up with more things if I stand a bit more in front of this computer? Maybe, but I think that's enough. I came up with 3 possible signals, and people listening to this episode will maybe, if you find it interesting, you may come up with some interesting ideas or finding other signals which were important in Bitcoin, and maybe share them with me. That would be amazing if you could do that. But let me talk about another project, because Bitcoin, that could be one in a million years thing, and we don't have a pattern here. We have one example which worked this way, right? But there are other projects in crypto which have the same characteristics or similar characteristics. And then if I can kind of convince you or make my case for the fact that this is there's a pattern here, then the thesis that this may happen in travel too gets a bit stronger. And the other project I want to talk to you about, I can't remember if I did it in past episodes, it's Thorchain. Okay, what is Thorchain? You may know that if you have Bitcoin, you cannot really exchange them for any other cryptocurrency, unless you go through a centralized exchange. Now, you have Bitcoin, you want to exchange them for Ethereum or other tokens. You cannot do it because, Bitcoin built its own thing, completely separated from the financial system, but it's also completely separated from all the other cryptocurrency ecosystem. Why? Okay, let's do a little bit of history. Because Ethereum came out, it had a completely different mission, much more flexible, doing many more things. And around Ethereum, the whole alternative blockchain ecosystem was born. Virtually every other blockchain is EVM based, so it can, in a way, talk to Ethereum through bridges. Then there's layer 2s like Optimism, Arbitrum. There's ZK scans, zero knowledge proofs, etc. So there's a whole ecosystem around Ethereum which Bitcoin does not have. If you want to exchange Bitcoin for Ethereum, you have to go through a centralized exchange. You could exchange your Bitcoin for wrapped Bitcoin and then exchange your wrapped Bitcoin for Ethereum, but that's a centralized aspect. Wrapped Bitcoins are fairly centralized, and they bring with them the usual centralization risks and trade-offs. So a few years ago, somebody came up with the idea to create a system which allows you to exchange Bitcoin for Ethereum, but in a completely decentralized way. And every time I say completely and decentralized in the same sentence, I'm making a mistake. Nothing is completely decentralized. Okay, but with a very, very high degree of decentralization. And that project is Thorchain. How does it work? Pretty technical. let me see how I can try to explain that. Well, it's based on nodes, so computers running all the time, and staking, people putting money in those nodes, a bit like the Ethereum staking, proof of staking system works. And it's been a long time, about 5 years. It was very complicated to build. It went through a couple of big hacks, so big difficulties. Oh, there you go. There's another signal. A very, very convinced and passionate, small, technical community. The same as Bitcoin, right? Few people who really believe this is the way, who are technical, because be careful, people believe this is the way and they are not technical. They're usually trying to follow some guru. All right, another characteristic, there you go. THORChain is giving us ideas here. No clear leader. I don't even know the name of the THORChain leader. There's not really a leader in the sense of like Vitalik Buterin or other very famous names. Yeah, there are people around there. There's the founders, etc. But there's no clear leader personality cult. And I'm not saying Vitalik, who has this, is actually a problem for Ethereum. This is something different. So two other signals. Let me stop for a second the description of THORChain. Very passionate community, which is there, working hard and going through difficulties. And no clear leadership. No very, well, in other words, the project doesn't stand on its feet because the leader is charismatic. It stands on its feet because there's people who are technical, so understand the intricacies of the problem, and believe in it very strongly. So THORChain had this. Let us go back to THORChain. So THORChain basically allows for you to swap Bitcoin with Ethereum and other, connects also other blockchains in a decentralized manner, which is again something which people will go like, well, why? I have Coinbase, I have Binance, I don't need that. And then FTX happened, and we were, strongly reminded that centralized systems are great, they're fast, they're cheap, but there's this big but. They have also many risks, and then slowly wallets started integrating with THORChain, and now you can use it through different interfaces. You don't even know you're using it. Maybe there's another signal, something at that level. Users don't even need to know they're using it because it is used behind the scenes. And now they are, this project is kind of starting to be recognized for what it is. It's a way to swap between blockchains, staying in the realm of the centralized ecosystem. It may all sound very technical to you, or not, depending where you are on your journey, but it's very important. In travel, we need decentralized, maybe underlying, maybe behind the scene technologies to solve the dilemma of, let's call it the silos dilemma. I'm sure people more advanced than me have different terms. The silos dilemma, where we don't have a shared ecosystem on which we can build innovation, but everything again is fragmented. So, all right, as we can see, THORChain has very similar again signals or characteristics to Bitcoin. So let's see them again before wrapping it up. One, mission impossible. Whatever they're trying to do is like, most people will say this cannot be done. All right. Second, very hard and slow to build. Very hard and slow to build. Then very hard and slow to use, especially at the beginning. Number 4, passionate technical community. Number 5, people saying the existing solution is fine and the community is saying no, it's not. So backlash against the very idea. So again, mission impossible, very hard to build, very hard to use, passionate technical community, and the existing solution is fine. No, it's not. All right, we will see this in travel. I don't know. Let's start thinking about it. Let me add the last thing. These kind of projects often end up opening a whole new space for people who want to build, smaller projects, because every single Web3 travel project today is going to kind of compromise with the existing legacy system. And if somebody builds something like TorChain, something like Bitcoin, etc. in travel, they will have better ways to build what they're trying to build, and needing to compromise much, much less on this. And I guess I'll stop it here. This is getting very theoretical. I hope you can get something good out of it. And let's see you next time. And we're done. Thank you for listening to this episode. For more insights, follow me on Twitter at tripluca, TRIPLUCA. If you enjoy my podcast and want to support it, head on to podcast.web3intravel.com, 3 is a digit, and mint an NFT. If you want to sponsor it, you can do it at the same page. I will mention you in the podcast, and your name will appear on all donation NFTs for a while. Thank you, and ciao.